welcome to our town hall on lineage-based reparations. So my name is Ashley Brown. I'm Sean's campaign manager and facilitator this evening. The goal of these town halls is to highlight systemic issues impacting our communities and amplify the voices of our local leaders, which we have here today. We also want to build bridges and coalitions, and while we can't do everything all the time, if we understand what's happening and if we know where we stand with what's happening, we can make real moves and we can show up in solidarity. So that's what this is about. The format tonight, Sean, our candidate and our host for the evening, will kick off the discussion, and we'll have 40 minutes at the end for Q&A.
Right. So lineage-based reparations is an issue that this campaign is centering. As a matter of fact, when we did our campaign kickoff, what was that, a month ago, 2 months ago? I can't even remember. But when, when we held our campaign kickoff in San Jose, Chris, one of our panelists, was one of the featured speakers at that event. So just to give you an idea of how important this issue is to this campaign. And actually, another of the panelists here, Audra, and I'm going to get to intros later, but I just want to acknowledge the importance of the people on this panel to this campaign. It was really Audra who educated me on this issue. Um, I I am now agreeing, and I have been agreeing for 5 years, but before that, I was a Bernie-crat. I was a Democrat who became a Bernie-crat. And I remember when I was a Bernie supporter, he was getting all this criticism of not having a black agenda. And at the time, I got so frustrated. I didn't know what that meant. There were these universal programs like, Medicare for all is going to benefit everybody, right? Or I can't, all of Bernie's signature programs. I didn't understand what the problem was. And then I got educated, in part, well, largely, as I said, by talking to Audra. And actually, Chris, we're going to hear from Chris, but Chris does a really great job of laying out the case for lineage-based reparations in a really short time. Chris, by the way, you're really great at making that case. And so I was persuaded once I got educated. And so that's what we're trying to do here is we're trying to educate people, bring it to a different audience that wouldn't otherwise hear it. And to me, what it really comes down to is specific historic wrongs require specific redress. It's not just that we need to lift up people of color. There are specific groups of people that were harmed in very specific ways and had specific promises broken to them, legal promises by the US government, right? And so in the case, I'm not going to try to make the case for lineage-based reparations. I'm going to leave that to the panel. But there were specific wrongs done to the people that were enslaved, and there were specific wrongs done to the indigenous people of this land, and there are specific redress forms of redress to those groups. And so that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to see the history of it. And we're going to see the legal argument for this specific form of reparation. And I'm just going to say that I get really frustrated when I see people just talking about their feelings. Like, I went and watched this movie, and gosh, I felt so bad. Well, I guess everything's okay now. I've learned my lesson. Um, I mean, there's been some real damage done over generations that can't be repaired by people feeling bad. There needs to be money. There needs to be land. There needs to be real material compensation because people were deprived of that, right? So, um, with that said, I know that it's been really interesting to me as a person running for federal office, as we've been interacting with these activists in different communities, how so much of their activism is focused on the local level, and the state level. and almost nothing at the federal level. And that's really interesting to me. And I wonder how much of that is because people think it's pointless. Like the federal government is going to listen to me. What's even the point? And we'll get into that. I want to ask questions of the panelists on that because that certainly came up last week when we were talking about the pesticide issue. But we'll get into that. Now let me introduce our panelists. I have to put on my glasses. I try not to wear them because of the reflection. So um, we've got Chris Lodgson. He's the lead organizer of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, CJEC. He's based in Sacramento. Chris has been a prominent reparations advocate focusing on lineage-based reparations legislation since 2022. He has played a crucial role in raising awareness about the long-term effects of chattel slavery and organizing community initiatives. Before his advocacy work, Chris was involved in various community and political efforts aimed at empowering marginalized voices. So that's the text. Let me just say about Chris, I hope he runs for office. I said that, yeah, he should. He should. Yeah, no. He totally should. After he spoke at our campaign kickoff, I was like, what? Why aren't you running? He was like, no, I got my work I got to focus on. But one day he needs to run for office, right? All right. And then we've got Tiffany Quarles. She's vice president of the Coalition for a Just and Equitable California, CJEC again, and co-chair of the Lineage, Equity, and Advancement Project, LEAP. She's based in Los Angeles. Tiffany has been a reparations advocate since 2019, helping to write legislation, educate the community, and organize around reparations. Prior to her advocacy work, she worked in the film and television industry. And Tiffany, I also want to thank you for very early on helping us get this issue integrated with the campaign. You were, I think it was actually you who connected us to Chris. So thank you very much for working with us. And finally, last but not least, Audra Walton. Audra Walton is serving as vice chair of the City of Marina's Planning Commission. She is also a co-founder of blackaf.net. Does that have a double meaning? It shouldn't. AF, does that have double? Yeah, okay. A lineage-based business directory and solidarity network for Black American freedmen in association with the Black Heritage Network with a commitment to community empowerment and economic justice. She actively participates in the Green Book 2.0 project, fostering connections and support among Black American Negro freedmen-owned businesses. Audra's work emphasizes the importance of heritage and solidarity in building a sustainable future for Black AF communities across the nation. So AF meaning American freedmen, but you might take that to mean something else as well. Uh, Mimi, did you want to jump in? Did you want to be part of this? She's on me. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So Mimi is a member of the school board at the MPUSD. Mimi, I didn't actually prepare an intro for you, but you can jump in at any time. She's like a de facto panelist. So if
Member of the school board, member of the Community Safety Advisory Commission for the City of Seaside, and then also on the board for the public access station here in Monterey, Access Media Productions.
Cool. Thanks for joining us, Mimi. So I guess I've heard Chris lay out the basic case. Would you mind, Chris, like kicking this off, giving us a little bit of the background, give your 5-minute
Yeah,
intro?
sure. Yeah, sure. And first, big shout out to you, Sean. Shout out to you, Ashley. Shout out to the whole campaign. My good dear friend and colleague, family member now, Tiffany, Audra, family as well. Appreciate you and everybody here watching now, and those who will watch the recording as well. Thank you so much for being here on a Sunday evening and talking about something that is very important, which is reparations. I'll lay out the case, and I kind of want to do it in this way. Usually I'll start something like this, and I've been doing this for years. I'll say, everyone stop what you're doing. Whether, except if you're driving, don't stop driving. If you're cooking, don't stop cooking. But everyone else, stop what you're doing and listen to the words that I'm saying. Every one of us is living inside of a history book right now. People are going to be reading, writing, and talking about what you did, what I did right now, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. And that is because California has and is the first state to get this close to reparations. And I believe California will be the first state to actually do reparations. Let me say the quiet part out loud here. What I mean when I say the word reparations, I'm talking specifically about direct monetary, economic, wealth, material, financial compensation, and restitution to a particular group of people for a particular wrong that a government has done to them. In our case, we're talking specifically about those of us whose ancestors were freed from chattel slavery in these United States. We are politically classified under the political status or the name, the fancy way to say the name or the label of American freedmen. We have been a population in this country that has been almost completely invisible, and our particular harms have not been redressed. And I want to talk more about those two particular points soon. But for our particular group, what we are owed for hundreds of years of forced, unpaid labor, and then also all the things that came after, is direct monetary economic compensation. And that is partly because that was what was extracted from us, but it's also because of what I'm about to say next. Nothing else is going to work. Nothing else is going to work, and that's a particular case that we make. It's a sharp case, but here's some of the evidence for it. So, people who are into the statistics and the numbers, they'll get this, and I'll give some statistics and numbers. But just regular folks like we are, we just know this naturally, just walking around and living in our daily lives. Our wealth position, our economic position impacts everything we do in our life, from how healthy we are, how healthy we can be, what school we go to, do we own a home? We make a particular case that I think is different. We're being told, and we've been told, that you get the schooling, the education, and then the wealth comes afterwards. You get the home, and then the wealth comes afterwards. We're making the case that actually wealth begets all of those things. Okay? The wealthier you are, the better schooling you are. The wealthier you are, the healthier you are, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? And we have some things in our community that need to be made better. So that's the first point, but that brings me to the second point. So it's almost, I think, undeniable, at least from our own lives, and not even talk about the numbers yet. It's almost undeniable that in our own lives, a lot of how successful we are in our own lives depends on the people that came before us. Whether or not you had a home, and your moms and your pops, and how much money they had, how much wealth they had, and did they transfer any wealth to you? Okay? And so the best way to understand the impact of the past and the present is wealth also. So wealth has a twofold benefit for us. Okay? And that's why we center our definition of reparations on wealth. Okay? I'm going to say a couple more things, and then I'm going to stop because I don't want to make this too long. Okay? And we're going to talk more about this as we get through the rest of the town hall. And I would love to hear other folks' thoughts too. But lastly, just for those who don't know, we are right now, sometimes people ask me, where are we right now? And I want to just sort of say something about this. We are right now in the second year of the first 2 years of California ever even attempting to do something called reparations. 2025, the start of 2025, was the second year in California's history that there were bills introduced specifically for people who are descendants of those who were enslaved in this country. After 400 years in this country, 150 years in the state, 175 years in the state, the first years ever that we had stuff specifically talking about us was 2024 and 2025. And that builds on the work that the State Reparations Task Force did over the 2 or so years of its work, where that state task force, which we helped write into law, that state task force worked for 2 years to educate the public about reparations, to document the evidence of the case for reparations, which, by the way, if you want a full case, chapters 1 through 40 really of the California reparations report outlined the exact case for reparations in California specifically, and then of course to, as the task force did, to make recommendations about reparations and what reparations should be. In California, we're specifically talking about slavery and the things that came after slavery. Okay? There was slavery in California. I'm gonna say that again. There was slavery here in the state of California. There was slavery here in the county where I'm sitting right now, which is the county of Sacramento. Okay? And so we'll talk more, but that is largely the case that we've been making for reparations, and we're building on work that our state reparations task force did. And I'll pass it back.
The hard thing is, Chris is very hard to follow. I'll just add that one thing. Sean is a member of the Green Party, and the Green Party of California recently adopted a platform plank specifically calling for direct cash and land reparations for Black American freedmen specifically. And it laid out it laid out the platform, laid out the plank very well for the platform. And the Green Party of US also has adopted that. I think there's some conversation going on inside of the Green Party that I don't agree with regarding reparations. But I did want to say that as of right now, the Green Party has baked into its platform reparations specifically for those that descend from those enslaved under the institutions of US American chattel slavery.
We did see a question in the chat, and I think it's a good question. And I was thinking about the same thing, which is, so what exactly are we talking about here? Like, I remember, Audra, you brought up the Green Party. I remember when Jill Stein was out. Jill Stein ran for president in 2024, explicitly supporting reparations. And when she was asked about the price tag, she would say 13 trillion. And I've heard some figures much larger than that, based on some real hard data. So can someone speak to that? Like,
Sure, I can.
what are we talking about here when we're talking about reparations at the state level or the federal? Because that's another question. Sorry, I don't mean to make the question too complicated, but we do need to consider this. Like, ultimately, this needs to be a federal action. We're starting with California, but like, how much are we talking about here? What's the minimum?
Yeah, I was going to say at the federal level, we've been following the guidelines of Dr. William Dougherty, who's an economist who formerly taught at Duke. I believe he's now at Howard University. His goal was to close the racial wealth gap, and he said it would take roughly 14 trillion. Of course, he said that should be spread out over 10 years. And that was to prevent inflation. So that's sort of like in the ballpark of where we're looking. At the state level, the economists from the task force estimated that the state of California plundered roughly 800 billion from the descendants. And I guess that's the number that should be restored. So at the national level, it would be, like I said, roughly 14 trillion. At the state level, it was revealed that that's how much we lost through all the harms.
Does anyone want to add to that?
Jump on in, Tim. Feel free. I just want to say Tiffany's spot on. It's interesting. So it's interesting, and so Tiffany, I think, did a great job of splitting hairs here a little bit too, because there's the question of how much is owed, and then there's the question of how much is going to be paid, right? And we make the case that as much as owed needs to be paid, right? Or as much as owed plus some interest needs to be paid. So that's the position that we've taken. But I think Tiffany's absolutely right. I actually wanted to maybe I'll wait for this. I want to also talk about how this is paid for too, right? So how do you pay for a $800 billion, $1 trillion bill, and how does the federal government pay the 14, 15 or so trillion or plus at minimum? And I've heard numbers I've heard numbers I've never heard before. Okay, and so but just to say a quick word on this, we've talked about a bunch of different ways to pay for this too. One, California, specifically at the state level, we could use our state reserves. We could use our state surpluses. We could, move money around it from our general fund. There's a lot of things that we're spending money on right now that we could be redirecting toward this. We could redirect some specific taxes that are collected right now toward this without raising anyone's taxes and without doing any new taxes. I mean, we could raise money in the bond markets. California regularly issues bonds to support projects for this, that, the third. So there are multiple ways to pay for something like this, but I think Tiffany's absolutely right. We're talking in the trillions, in the tens, if not multiple, plus that in the trillion at the federal level. And we're talking at least $1 trillion at the state level. By the way, that $1 trillion, that $800 billion to $1 trillion that Tiffany's talking about, the state task force economists, who also included, by the way, Dr. William Dougherty Jr., who did the federal, sort of pricing of what this would cost, and wrote a bunch of books too. And papers about how you actually calculate the cost. The state task force, $800 billion, that is what California, as Tiffany rightly said, plundered, stole, extracted, took from us for 5 of the 12 different areas of harm that the task force looked at. It did not include the 7 others. Okay, so that 800 billion is maybe like 40%, if we're just sort of doing some rough math, from 40%, right? Maybe 50%. At best, of what is owed, what was taken from us here in the state of California.
Well, sorry, I could use some education. So I grew up in the Midwest, and then I lived in North Carolina, Arizona, Texas. So I'm actually not, I was raised kind of thinking of California as not being part of slavery. So maybe there's other people in the room who don't know this either. Like, could you just very briefly describe what slavery in California looked like? Because that's an astonishing number. If just California, which I don't even think of as being a slave state, owes 800 billion, I assume that's in $2025, or $2020 or whatever, whenever the study was done. What does a deep South state owe? Maybe I'm asking too many questions at once, but could you describe could someone describe
I can briefly describe it, and Chris or Audra could elaborate, but I will say that California entered a union of free state. I think we all know that, but what was found that the state did have its own version of the Fugitive Slave Act, meaning if runaway slaves entered the state, the state would send them back to the Deep South, but also when slaveholders from the Deep South would bring enslaved people to the state, it was allowed, such as the case of Biddy Mason. She was from Mississippi originally. She was brought to California by the Mormon Church because her master converted to the Church of Latter-day Saints. And when she got here, she was enslaved in San Bernardino. She did ultimately get her freedom, but she's an example of one version of slavery that took place in California. Someone mentioned the gold rush in the chat. That's something that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, that during the gold rush, many enslaved people were brought here to work in the gold mines against their will. So California definitely has a legacy of slavery, but we also have to remember that reparations is also for the aftermath to slavery as well. For example, both sides of my family came to Los Angeles from the South in the early 1940s. When they settled in Los Angeles, I don't think many people know that LA was literally segregated. It was legal segregation. And that was just a result of the legacy of slavery in the state, which mirrored the rest of the nation. So Black Californians were relegated to red line communities and, all the harms that came from that. So it is slavery, but also what happened after slavery, which impacts us still to this day.
For me, reparations is a return on investment. I'm going to talk nationwide. Return on investment of the sweat equity that my ancestors invested under forced labor, right? And I did calculate what that looked like if we were going to use the federal minimum wage. I'm looking at a spreadsheet. $7.25 an hour, 10 hours a day. These are the softest numbers. They're unimaginable for what our ancestors went through. So these are soft numbers, right? At 10 hours a day for 312 days a year. That's $22,620 a year that they would have been paid, but they weren't for their labor. That's an investment. It's an investment. It's sweat equity, right? So over 35 years, if my ancestors had made $7.25 an hour and received a 3% annual raise over a 35-year period, they would have been emancipated with $791,700, but they didn't. So now we're adding interest. And when we add interest to what our ancestors didn't receive, and let me just shrink this screen a little bit and pull those numbers up, at just 1.1%, that's $791,700 over 159 years. I haven't redone these numbers because we get to add a year. So we're now at 160. That's $25,191,444.84 at 1.1%.
1.1% is a really, really, really low interest rate, right? Like,
it is.
When wealthy people talk about their retirement, when their safe money, they're getting 4% returns, right? So like you're being really, really generous here with 1.1.
Super generous. So that's, and of course that's compounding. I did do it under simple interest. I matched what these colleges are charging our parents to put their kids through school at 7.5% interest. That's simple interest. So that number came out to be 9 million. No, I lied. That's, let me go back to the one here. $227,224,384.62. And that would be per person, per descendant, right? If we were using today's Parent Plus, what the UC and CSU system gets
I'm sorry, Audra, could you say it one more time? So I'm starting to get lost. So you're talking about for the people currently alive, for freedmen currently alive?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you say the figure again?
The figure again, at that simple interest rate of 7.54%, the amount due is, oh, I read the wrong line, $228,653,468.80.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So,
and Brother Sean, real quick, can I add this too, real quick on this?
Yeah.
Because I want to say this too, because I want to before I forget, because I wanted to make sure that folks are aware. I put something in the chat just a minute ago, and shout out to our sister Audra for the numbers here. There is a whole chapter on this in the Reparations Task Force final report. It's chapter 15, I believe, and we actually read it on YouTube. It's on YouTube. I think I read that chapter actually, and it's a lot of numbers. Listen, like Sister Audra talking about, you're going to hear me reading numbers. This point, that, and then formulas. But the economists did a great job of this, and our Sister Audra is echoing a lot of that great work. Real quick, just for folks on the slavery in California thing, check out that Gold Chains link that I put in the chat. But so we work with people who are the descendants of people who were enslaved in California. Like we physically work with people who are the descendants of people whose ancestors were enslaved in the state of California, to this day. And I can introduce you to them. They testified to the California Reparations Task Force. Their stories are contained in chapter 2, and the hearings that featured them are in the first 3 or so months of the California Reparations Task Force hearings in the summer of 2021. They're on our website too, by the way, www.cjec-official.org on the videos page. And if you go to that first 3 months, you'll see in the hearings people who are the living current descendants of people who were enslaved in the state of California. One of our colleagues' ancestor was brought enslaved to California to work in the gold mines, as Tiffany was saying, then managed to free himself, was captured under that fugitive slave law that Tiffany talked about, and then re-enslaved here in the state of California, twice in the state of California. The Sacramento Bee had a story Sacramento Bee had a story some 5 or so in the last 5 years or so, documenting an attempt, a court recorded attempt to sell an enslaved black girl in the year 1864, about a year or so after the Emancipation Proclamation, a year after Abraham Lincoln said everybody could go. Okay. So this is slavery occurring in Sacramento County after the Civil War is, going on. So I just wanted to add that. And there are grave sites in Northern California that you can visit with permission, where on the gravestone you see no birth date, a dash, then you see a death date, and then it says born enslaved under, and I've seen them myself.
I want to present you with I think a question that would come from people who oppose this. That they ask, why should there be this specific compensation for this particular group of people? Why shouldn't there be a universal program? Because I'm telling you this as a person who was persuaded by that argument just a few years ago. And I think that's kind of like the mainstream, that's kind of the consensus at the moment, right? So what do you say to a person who has that objection?
I would personally say it's a dead ode. Keep in mind, for reparations for Black Americans, a lot of it's rooted in Reconstruction. Once the Civil War was done and the Union won, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments came out of that, and there was promise of land, education, and to make us whole. And we all know that didn't happen, and the harm continued. So it's not reparations is not a poverty program. It is about restorative justice and the nation upholding its promises to us. I mean, I still believe we do need universal health care and free college and all those things, but it is separate from reparations. For example, Japanese Americans were placed in internment camps during World War II. That happened in my lifetime. The reparations for Japanese Americans, I should say, happened in my lifetime. And I didn't have anything to do with it, but it was a debt that the country owed because it did something wrong to Japanese Americans specifically. And it's about righting the wrongs. And I personally believe the nation needs it right now. I feel like we're at a crossroads as a nation. We have forces trying to pull us backwards. And reparations is about healing and moving us forward so we can have a better union for all of us. So it's about our nation's soul, in my opinion, doing what's right and really just improving the nation that we all live in, because our current system, the foundation of it is slavery, and it's not working for any of us. So if we want something better for us all, it starts by righting the wrongs of slavery, Jim Crow, and that would only make it easier for us to get the universal health care, all the programs that we need for us all to be better taken care of.
I think I'm gonna piggyback up on what Tiffany's saying and just add that with respect to the US dollar and its current declining purchasing power parity, I argue that reparations is something that this nation absolutely needs to do in order to create some kind of new faith into the US dollar, because it's collapsing. And like Tiffany was saying, with respect to the amount of healing that would bring to the nation, to this economy, because of course we would be putting monies back into the economy. I would argue, and I do argue, that reparations for us is a good thing. It's almost imperative that the nation go ahead and cut the check and create, right? Because at the end of the day, the US dollar is backed by our faith in it. And the global faith in it is declining. They give us in a, how do you call it when you're making a payment that you can't really afford? Faith, you guys have written this check before where you pay a little bit just so whoever it is that was holding your debt is just like, just wait another week and I'll be there, right? That's a good faith check. That's what the United States needs to write right now. It needs to write a good faith check to the Black American Negro freedmen of this land.
Chris, do you have something to add?
I think I said that maybe you want to get in. Maybe you want to jump in.
Let me see. We're doing double dutch.
Yeah.
I just actually wanted to make a comparison kind of piggybacking off of what Tiffany was saying. So if we look at the Holocaust, and even if I'm going to actually go back. So I'm going to go back to like the 1890s when you look at the propaganda campaigns, all the way through World War II. We have continued to pay reparations, not just to Holocaust survivors, but now also descendants. And so the last payment that I had actually, read up on the resolution for it, et cetera, was in January of 2024 from Kathy Hochul's administration in New York. And so it was said, because we want to make sure we never forget that, this was a debt that was owed to these people that basically suffered a heinous atrocity. And so the thing is that what a lot of people don't know, when it comes to the Holocaust, you have the bad actors of the Holocaust that actually studied American slavery. So they studied the propaganda campaigns that kind of basically reinforced or invigorated slavery here. They found basically a working oppressive society that was a successful oppressive society, and basically took the tools that society was using and then re-implemented them to do what they did in Nazi Germany to Jewish people. So you're basically validating the fact that people that go through a heinous oppression are owed repair, but then this country continues to tell us as freedmen that yes, we are gonna give this repair to the Jewish people, and yes, what they went through is connected to slavery in regards to the fact that the people that did it studied it and then implemented it on them, but then we're not going to pay you for what you went through or repair you for what you went through. But it's valid to pay them, but it's not valid to pay you, and that makes no sense.
Well, can I make
And so,
sorry,
uh-huh.
I'd like to comment.
Go ahead.
But yeah, go ahead, finish up.
No, I was just saying. So, I mean, this country's done it multiple times. We paid for the Italian soldiers that were lynched and almost got into a war with Italy. We paid the internment for the Japanese. We continually have this rule about you have to repair people that have gone through an atrocity, but then the people that have gone through the greatest atrocity known to this world are being told, no, you guys need to forget it. You need to move on. It's too far in the past. No, none of the survivors are alive. You guys are descendants. We don't pay descendants. But again, in January 2024, we paid descendants of Holocaust survivors. So we actually do pay descendants. We just don't pay Black ones.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point. I think that it's beyond living memory when the atrocity happened. I think that's the sticking point for a lot of people.
Well, but that's the thing, though. So we can even look at something recent. So you had 4 elders that survived the Tulsa massacre. So they
Right.
were actual survivors. They were babies when it happened. They were still denied. So even that fails because you have survivors of an atrocity and you still told them, no, you're not worthy of repair.
Right.
But again, you're still paying other people for their atrocities. So
Yeah.
whether you're a survivor or a direct victim of the atrocity, you're telling Black people no, but everyone else, yes.
Well, let me just ask about the 40 acres and a mule, because I remember coming up through public schools. This is something that was mentioned. It's like, well, that was something that was promised, and then we didn't. Oh, that's too bad. I guess. Oh well. Is that part of the legal case at all? Because mostly I've been hearing people talking about wages denied. Is the 40 acres and a mule at all a part of the legal argument for reparations?
Well, from my knowledge,
Oh, sorry.
and then I'll let you go because I was saying from my knowledge, it has been mentioned, but that was something that was never fulfilled. But I mean, the fact that it was put forward does show that at that time, someone was thinking, okay, yeah, we need to repair these people, and then that was taken back, and then instead of repairing freedmen, we repaired the Southerners and paid them for their lost slaves and their lost business or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I would think it carries some weight, but again, that wasn't fulfilled. So it just kind of shows that someone was thinking, yeah, then we need to do something, but then you know we didn't get it.
But when
So
we're doing calculations about what is owed, it has more to do with the wages that were denied versus that specific promise.
Well, let me
Can
add
I?
this, let me add to
yeah,
this
let
piece here,
Chris.
just to talk from
Chris.
the specifics of the reparations task force here. But real quick, Sean, just to, let me add one thought to your last question too about the universal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick. I want to say something provocative. I want to put it on my progressive and left of center and well-meaning folks here who have been supporting this work. I'm going to make the point. I want to make a point that I want you to think about it. Just think about it, okay? And let's talk about it at some point. Maybe not today, but at some point. One, universal programs. One, as Tiffany said, you could do them both. So like, there's nothing stopping us from doing universal healthcare and the reparations too, right? Well, what we're told is let's do universal only. Okay, so that's a different kind of thing. Okay, that is not going to get a good reaction, right? But I want to make a point, and we've seen some of this in the data. Some universal programs hurt us. Some universal programs hurt us. I'll give you two quick examples. Affirmative action, okay? A program that became universal, and now, and as much as we've seen in the evidence, we are the least beneficiaries of affirmative action. It actually is helping other groups more than us. Okay? Affirmative. So, and then also one that you may think might be different. Relieving all student debt. Okay. That has the ability, according to some of the information I've read and seen, to at least do no helping of us as a people, if not hurting us as a people. And I'm speaking by hurting and helping, I'm talking about wealth. Okay. And I want to come back to that at some point. But I think Mimi and the team are raising really, really good points about the 40 acres. I want to direct folks to a really good series that I think PBS did. It's called 40 Acres and a Lie. And they did it this year. What turns out what happened is, there were some 40 acres awarded to some of our enslaved ancestors or formerly enslaved ancestors. There are parts of the southern parts of South Carolina, I believe, and parts of the South that were, and there are deeds to show it, where formerly enslaved people got 40-acre deeds of land. Then that was then rescinded and taken away from them. Okay? So that's why they call it 40 acres and a lie, because some of our ancestors got 40 acres and then had it taken away within the first 2 or so years of the Reconstruction period. But to your point, Sean, the case that we're making for reparations, so the way that the state task force did this is they put a financial value on the harms themselves. So what is the financial economic loss to us not getting the 40 acres? What is the financial or economic loss of us living shorter lifespans because of the health harms? What are the financial and economic losses to us as a people because of the environmental harms? What are the financial and economic losses because of the mass incarceration and over policing? And the state task force went with every single one of the 12 chapters is about one of those harms. And then what the economists did is they put dollar figures on those harms. So what does it cost for you to have a 7-year average shorter lifespan? Well, the state task force economist said, well, let's just say that you would have made X amount of dollars per your lifetime, and you lost 7 years of your lifetime. And so this is how much wealth was removed from your life because of the health harms. And they did that kind of thing for multiple different harms. So you for land and for property, it's easier to do this because that has a easier, financial and economic value. But the task force also did this kind of thing for the other kinds of harms too. So the land and the property does get factored into what we are owed. It absolutely does. We've pushed a bill last year, and there's a bill this year actually too that would, well, last year, the bill would have authorized the return of property for folks who had their property taken by the state, or the transferring of a property of equal value if the property was not owned by the, was not in the state's hands, or financial compensation at the current fair market value of that property minus the taxes. Okay? So to compensate you financially for what the value of that property was. There was a bill to do that last year. That bill died, or actually was vetoed by the governor.
Okay.
But, yeah, stop there.
Sorry. No, so we're going to open it up to the audience just in a few minutes here. But before we do, I would like you to talk. You were just getting at something that I wanted to ask you about, which is the state of affairs in California, because it sounds like there were some good things happening, and then there's some ways of like slow rolling things and deferring it. And you were telling me something about like the DOJ is going to be involved with deciding like who's eligible for the right. Can you talk to the current state of affairs in California just very quickly? I know that's a big question for you.
Yeah, no, I'll make it quick. Because we kind of set this up already. We are at an inflection point, I think, right now. So this year we have been focused on really stopping the attempt to slow and stall and study reparations out of existence. And so there's a bill right now that we've been really working against. It's Senate Bill 437. We're asking folks right now to go to our social media pages and our newsletter and our website and take the call to action that we're asking folks to do, which is to tell the governor to veto this study, this more reparations study effort. So that's partly where we are right now, which is resisting and confronting, and then also offering a better vision for what we could do. Okay? There's a better way to do this. We don't need to do more studying, and that's what the reparations study bill, SB 437, does. And then, as you mentioned, there's another bill or something about another bill that we have our eye on. This is Senate Bill 518. This bill would create a new state bureau. Originally, the bureau would have been inside of the state's largest law enforcement agency called the California Department of Justice. Thanks to you and us and everybody here, that has been changed. That thing is no longer in the law enforcement agency. Who wants a reparation system in a law enforcement agency? But there's still big problems with that bill. We also asking the governor to veto that bill because specifically the bill is not going to be only for freedmen. It's not only going to be for us, and we want something specifically only for us. So those are two of the things that we have our eye on. And again, we're offering and presenting and working with our community to build a better vision. We can do this better. We don't have to go down this study, stall, stop, block, bait, and switch pathway. We have a better vision and a better way to do that, and I'm excited about sharing that with people.
And I was going to say, Sean, that's where you come in. You could be a leader in this space simply because, in my opinion, all of our current elected officials in both parties are failing us, and we are looking for candidates like yourself who want to take bold steps and take a leadership role on this. I feel like a lot of people in my community in particular are disillusioned with both especially with the Democratic Party. So this is an opportunity for you to really distinguish yourself and, as Chris say, enact a bold vision that actually moves our country forward. So I just wanted to add that.
What should we be pushing for at the federal level?
Tiffany, I'll let y'all take that one. Tiffany works at the federal level. Go ahead, Tiffany.
We need lineage-specific policies. Like, we didn't really talk about why lineage is important, so I'll just briefly go into that really quick.
Yeah, thank you.
As you know, we cannot do policies based on race. In the state of California, it violates Prop 209, but at the federal level, it does violate the 14th Amendment. And so we found that if you do policies based on lineage or status, that is acceptable, and that's why we use the term freedmen, because that status is tied to the Reconstruction era. And so it isn't really it's not about race, it's about status. So we're not saying reparations because we're Black, we're saying because we are part of a class of people that were harmed. And so we need lineage specific policies. We need a Freedmen's Bureau at the federal level. Right. We need disaggregated data. We need reparations. We need policies that target the American freedmen. So, that is where you, as a congressman, could introduce legislation to get the ball rolling. In particular, like I said, with reparations, but also with other lineage-based policies.
Well, I would love to ask more about the Freedmen's Bureau because I love the idea of creating that again. I would love to learn more, but I want to open it up to the audience. Before we open up to the audience, is there any call to action? Is there any website that should be put in the chat? Like any kind of way that people could sign up to get a newsletter, or is there any petition you're trying to get signed?
I'm gonna jump in real quick. Go to our social media page right now. Go to our Instagram at CJEC Official. Go to us on Twitter, X, TikTok, Facebook, everywhere at CJEC Official. Follow us right now. Follow us. Secondly, go to our website, www.cjec-official. It's in the chat.org/get involved. Go to the Get Involved page. Sign up for the newsletter. The newsletter, by the way, is now public on our website. So you actually don't have to sign up for the newsletter to get the newsletter. Why wait? You can just go there anytime you want. So the newsletter is now publicly hosted on our website. But if you like to read emails, sign up for the newsletter. And then also contact the governor. Tell him to veto SB 437 and to veto SB 518. And we have actions on our website, on our socials, and in our email that make that easy to do. So tell the governor, stop these bills.
Carolyn, yeah.
There you go, guys. Thank you, Sean, for being here, and everyone, Chris and Tiffany and Audra. I have the honor of working with these fine young people for the last 2 years. I think it might be 3 years. I don't know. You know, the time is just flying by so fast. But I'm actually forming a committee to run for state assembly in California. And because of my work with CJEC, I become laser focused on reparative justice. And so part of the things that I'm doing, and you asked the question, what can the federal government do in terms of reparations? They need to just do direct cash and direct services to the descendant community, and they know why, because they have a compassion for other groups, and we have our set of harms as well. So it's no need for studies. All of this is very long-term documented. And so that's what the federal government can do, is just find some courage to go ahead and do reparations with direct payments and services. And another thing that I do want to share with you is this. I spend all day, every day thinking about reparations and how we can serve our country and our descendant community. And one of the things we were talking about is a program, a reparations cash program. So I want to know what people think about that, because we got to start thinking about that. We got to start thinking about how much is that in terms of. So I did a little study, you know, with the little chat GPT, and I asked the chat, let's calculate a $30 billion program, okay, for California. The California state budget, I think, is like 200 and something billion or trillion. I'm not sure.
It's
maybe
about $500 billion every year.
Oh, okay. And so with this program, there's 2.5 million Black Americans in the state of California. So say you just served 100,000 the first year, because everybody's not going to get it and everybody's not going to want it. You know what I mean? So say you just served the first 100,000 in the first year. So that is going to create that is going to be about 9% of the California total budget. About 9%, maybe 13%. It's not a charity, but a measured start to repair and deliberate harm. This program would provide direct cash, but the thing is, it's going to build GDP. It's going to result in a GDP increase And over 5 years, it'll be $6 billion a year. The California GDP is $5 trillion, it's saying, and 2025 estimate. So a program like this would generate up to 36 increase of 36 to 51 billion to the California GDP. So I said that all to say we have to start making that economic argument so that it makes sense to everyone that this is not pulling from the state of California, which they stole from Black Americans, but it is giving back to them and restoring what was stolen and also uplifting the state revenue, tax revenue, GDP, all of that. I've been saying this for years. Please make that argument so that others can feel more comfortable about what reparations is going to do. And that's all I have to say.
Real quick, I have to say, Sister Carolyn, first of all, Sister Carolyn, I think is brilliant as always. I think Sister Carolyn, though, is an example of something that we have been realizing, and this gets to your last question too, Brother Sean. I'll make this quick. So I've said publicly, and I'm going to keep saying, this is why I'm glad that we're doing this with somebody like you, Sean, and with the campaign. We don't have the right people in office to do this job. That's just clear. It's clear. It's clear. Okay? I can't tell you the amount of, and I'm in the Capitol building here in Sacramento, at least once a week. At least once a week. Let me tell you, the amount of excuses I hear, what we can't do, how small we got to be, how we got to be tucking our tail politically during this time. Seem like we the only one who got to have the tail tucked for, though. For everybody else, it's, let's beat the chest, we tough. All right? But when it comes to us, let's not even say reparations.
Right.
Don't even say it. Don't say it because you're going to scare some people. You're going to scare some of our friends.
Right.
So I think Carolyn's an example of one of us who said, I'm going to go be the decision maker myself. I'm just going to go replace the person. So I think that is something that I think is very, very important. And I know your party and other folks, I think are important in that work, because we do not have the right people, and especially with the 100% control that the Blue Party has here in Sacramento, it's almost impossible to get anything done without some real political, things moving. So,
no, that's a good point. They need to believe that you can walk away. This is something I like we've got to present a challenge, some opposition. Like, imagine going to a car lot and you say to the salesperson, I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to buy it from your lot. I won't go to any other lot. I'll pay whatever you ask. Now let's negotiate. That's basically
impossible.
That's how people approach politics, it feels like. You need some leverage to get something done. But so, the way that I tend to think about politics is that to me, the biggest problem is money. You've got these special interests that finance the campaigns of the people getting elected, and the people who get elected know that they need that money again to get reelected, and so they do whatever they need to do to get that money the next time, and then they start doing bad things to satisfy their donors, and then that means they need even more money. So to me, that's the root of all evil. But I have a feeling that with this issue, it's maybe not quite that simple, or is it? This is audience question time, but if someone wants to address that, did you want to just comment on that very quickly? Do you think it's just a matter of money, or do you think it's a little deeper than that?
I think money is all in this. Part of the reason why I think a lot of not all, but a lot of the groups are supporting the studies bills that we're seeing now here in California, and the Forever Bureau bills that we're seeing here in California, is partly because there's money involved. I mean, we're doing a YouTube live on Wednesday on our CJEC YouTube channel that is going to talk all about the money. It's called Follow the Money. It's going to be all about the money. The $12 million that was in the state budget last year for reparations, et cetera, et cetera. And that's government money, but something that I learned happens, and I think this is corruption, but you tell me. So we pay tax dollars, it goes to Sacramento. Then for what I'm hearing in the Capitol, there are elected officials who then direct some of those funds to nonprofits who they're friendly with, who then come and lobby their bills and help them get reelected with that same tax money. That to me is corruption, but that is happening. There are people bragging about that in Sacramento, about how we can do that. Okay? And so yeah.
I was going to say, in addition to money, you're also dealing with anti-Black racism, white backlash, and from other non-white groups, because we do have a caste system that was born out of slavery. And, folks, there are people who just are uncomfortable with the idea of Black America no longer being the bottom caste. But like I said, that is what's killing our nation. So, people need to understand that. But it is a huge part of it, is what their constituents think.
Right. So they fear that if they pursue reparations, they're going to lose votes.
Precisely.
There was a question from the chat. Laura asked, what was the bill that was for reparations that in California that Newsom didn't sign? I think it was mentioned earlier. I don't know if anybody had that.
Sorry about that. That was Senate Bill 1050.
Thank you.
1050 from 2024.
Thank y'all for inviting me to this. Michael, thank you for inviting me to this. I've been following, which I've been doing in California quite extensively. My name is Jesse Paris. I ran for office 3 times here in Colorado, City Council, Mayor, House District 8, and I've been pushing for reparations since at least 2018. What I wanted to say is, how do we build the leverage to force these politicians' hands? Because both the Democrats and the Republicans have made it clear that they're not going to support direct lineage-based cash payments for American freedmen. So do we send a message to them at the ballot box in 2026 during the midterms? And what exactly is our alternative with the Green Party? I myself am part of the Unity Party, which is a minor legitimate party here in the state of Colorado, and other independent parties to force their hands as well to actually come out with a dollar amount, because they'll say they'll support reparations, but then they won't have a dollar amount. I went through this with Cornel West. I supported Cornel West. Cornel West, when he first ran for office, he had an amount about 14 to 20 trillion. Then he completely took that off his website and had me and others that were supporting him looking crazy, because we're like, yeah, Cornel supports reparations, but there's no dollar amount listed. Same thing with Jill Stein. Same thing with these other independent candidates that were running for presidents. So we know it's going to have to be at the federal level, state level, and local level. I myself am working on all 3 fronts. I'm working at the federal level, I'm working at the local level, and I'm working at the national level. We currently have a study going on right now in Colorado for reparations under the guise of a racial equity study. But I'm with y'all. I don't want no study. You know what you did. You know what you continue to do. The debt is owed, is compounding interest. And we're just tired of this. You want our votes, but then you don't want to do nothing specifically for us. You didn't have to do no bill, no study to pass money for illegal migrants to get what they got. But yet the people that built the country are still sitting here begging and pleading for what is rightfully owed to us. So my question is, how do we cover all 3 fronts, the local, state, and federal?
Yeah, well, I'm just going to repeat what I said before, that to have leverage, there needs to be a fear that they're going to lose votes if they don't do this, that there's an alternative that people can go to. And that's why I think that the independent parties are so important. And I also want to say that we're at a really historic moment right now. I think we're at an inflection point. The way that I think of party politics in America is that you had a major inflection point around the time of the Civil War, right? One of the 2 major parties died and was replaced by the Republican Party. And by the way, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but my understanding is that the Republican Party was the result of many small third parties throughout the nation that were anti-slavery coming together and forming a major party. So that was one major inflection point. And then another, so that was the first one that I'm aware of. And then the second one was during the civil rights movement, when there was this realignment between the Democrats and the Republicans. The racist white Southerners started fleeing the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, and the nature of the two major parties really changed. And I think that we're potentially at a third major inflection point. And we need to take advantage of it as much as we can. But we're seeing the Democratic Party is the least popular it's ever been as far back as the data goes, right? So they should be scared if they're not. So I think we've got some leverage there. Look at the way that there were 10 million people that voted for Biden in 2020 that stayed home in 2024. They are just bleeding out, right? Their support. And that's where we can come in and start making demands and say, well, you know what, if you're not going to do what I want, then I'm going to this other party. And I think that what's happening in Palestine is probably the greatest crime against humanity since World War II. At least that's my opinion. It's at least one of the greatest, right? And I think that's why the Democratic Party is dying right now, is that they are complicit in that as an institution, as an organization. And that's why that's a big part of why there is this historic moment of major change in the political system. And so we can exploit that. So that's what I have to say. Somebody else can chime in.
Well, if I could real quick, and then feel free to jump in, cut me off, team. But please do. I think you raised a great point. So, I think what we saw last year with the uncommitted, and then and then specifically in Michigan, what happened, and then the Muslim vote writ large across the country, in reaction to what happened, in Gaza and what's still happening in Gaza, quite frankly, was very important for us. And I was watching it because I think we learned a lot. Well, I think we learned that, and this is something that you kind of walked up to it, Sean. I'm gonna go a little bit like one step over. You actually have to show them that you are willing to vote for not them. You have to show them. But I've got to show them a couple of times. I think it's gonna take at least a couple of times. This is to Brother Jesse's point. By the way, Brother Jesse, brother, thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you for getting in the fight and for working to become one of the people who is making the decision. We need more people doing that. And as we have just been saying, so there's I think a political revolution happening right now too. But to your point here, we actually have to show them. So it's gonna take Democrats losing seats in California and Republicans gaining seats, Green Party gaining seats, third party gaining seats, other parties gaining seats. The stranglehold of the left Democrat Party in California and Sacramento has to be broken, if you ask me, because it's not working. It clearly for us specifically. I also think so. Part of how we do that is one, running our own people, right? Getting our own people in office. To Jesse's point, but also I think this movement has to get bigger. So more people have to get involved. Clearly.
And can I just say?
Jump on it, Tiffany.
Yeah, we also need to be fearless because, their strategy for the midterms is to use Trump as a boogeyman. Like, you have no choice but to vote for me because it's either us or him. And so we already know. I just was listening to, I believe it was Chuck Schumer, and, they asked him about the midterms, and basically that was his response. We're confident that we're going to win back the Senate because everybody's scared of Trump. So it's in this moment, we can't allow fear to dictate the decisions we make. And like you said, we need to take advantage of this moment. And, part of that is giving people a better alternative.
And attack now.
Mm-hmm.
Attack now. You mentioned it, Sean. There's weakness now. Hit them now and don't stop until after. To be honest with you, for the next 3 years, you should be hitting them hard. But definitely now. Sorry, Audra.
No, because I'm gonna jump right in where you are, and I'm gonna add, vote with your dollars. Watch where you spend your dollars. Watch who you associate yourself with. When you're looking at candidates that you're supporting, but yeah, give Deshaun. I don't know if he put his link in there yet. a gift to Sean's campaign.
I'm not good
right?
at fundraising. No, I'm not gonna.
Jesse,
I never do that.
I don't know if Jesse is running today for anything right now, but absolutely, that's where we start to move that mountain. Is to we're the consumer, and that market we participate in, or we don't. We can go and find other places to spend our dollar, and we can create worker co-ops to start replacing some of those things that we don't want to buy anymore, right?
Absolutely.
We are,
yeah.
At the end of the day, we are Americans, right? I think I don't know how many of you are in here were alive and plus or minus adulthood around September 11th, but and again at the very beginning of COVID, when our worlds fell apart and we didn't know what in the world we were going to do next, we did turn to our neighbors, and we did find that our neighbors actually didn't kill us. So at least right where I am, I saw it happen across the nation. But what am I trying to say here? I think at the end of the day, as a collective, when more people like Sean and Ashley, Michael Pan, I see that's out in the audience, step up to the plate and start actually using their dollars and their voices to do something against this Anglo-American stranglehold on hegemonic superpowers and economic dominance. And so that's where we hit them again, is in their pockets.
Well, I just want to say one thing that this is maybe a little half-baked of a thought, but I've been thinking about how the US government as a legal entity has been alive since its founding, right? So like you and I as individuals were not alive when slavery was an institution, but the US government was. It's the same entity. And yeah, it did have to pay some reparations for the internment of the Japanese, but that's kind of small. Like the reparations there are pretty small compared to what we're talking about that is owed to freedmen, right? Like, so it's been kind of minor. It broke all those treaties with the indigenous people. Hasn't really had to do much on that front. Like, it keeps getting away with murder. Like, something even more heinous than murder, right? Like the greatest crimes against humanity have been committed by this organism, this legal entity. It just keeps getting away. Look at what it's doing in Palestine. It's rampaging. Like something has to stop this. So I think that maybe this won't be too persuasive to many people, but I think that there's a case that like this entity, this legal entity, the United States federal government needs to pay for its crimes against the freedmen, to your ancestors. It needs to pay for the crimes that it paid against the indigenous people. Otherwise, it's going to keep rampaging as it's doing currently in Palestine.
You raise a good point there, Sean. That is very you're right. So that point is a point that we do make, that we are our case for reparations. So sometimes when people who have, and there's people who have a reaction to this, who don't support, at least in their in their first hearing about it, who can be moved to support this, and there are people who can't. And sometimes we don't know the difference, and sometimes we do. But for those who may say, listen, and who say in good faith, I wasn't alive, why should I have to pay, and et cetera, et cetera. It's similar to the argument that you're making. We do make this point that nobody's coming to your pockets, and we don't think you have the reparations in your pockets, in your bank account. We're not coming. This is not going for a particular individual person. Our case is not against you individually. We're not even blaming you individually. Obviously, you was not there. Obviously, okay? So I cannot hold you like I cannot blame you for what your ancestors did. But here's the point: this action, this harm was done by an entity, the thing called the United States government. The entity was alive then, as you just said. It's alive now. And the things that it took from us, it still has them. It still has the money. It still has the wealth. So it must return it. But the point you're making about the living U.S. government is a good point. We do make it. It's not usually very persuasive, but it definitely helps at least plant the seeds for other things.
Sorry, I was trying to say Michael has had his hand up for about 45 minutes. Michael, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, so I do want to ask a question. Thank you so much. Yes, I decided to pass the throne to Jesse Paris because he's an American freedman. So I always believe those who founded this country, who built this country, and volunteers to go first before I go. Because what I learned is that whenever like non-Black Americans, say they're very thankful, but they're not very thankful. The only way to show thanks or gratitude is through substance, cash payment reparations, because money is king in this country, right? Because without money, you can't pass on wealth to your kids and your grandkids for several, generations. And also because American freedmen had a 400 years lag, and whereas white people they had a 400 years head start. So it is time to close the gap with cash paying reparations because several economists and several studies have said that the wealth gap is going to get bigger and bigger if cash paying reparations are not cut. If I'm sorry, if cash paying reparations are not being given to American freedmen, it's said by 200 trillion dollars, I think by the year 2050, and it's happening very quickly. And it has to be addressed, like today, rather than uh later. But yeah, but before that, I just want to say thank you to you. Thank you so much to you guys for giving this very powerful presentation. Good at pushing back against opponents of reparations because I think this is very important because, as um as I work with several people, who's on the panel, could tell you that, I've been very, fearless, very persistent, always, following up, always giving, gratitude, credit where credit needs to be given, right? Because what I learned is that when a group of people benefit at the expense of American freedmen, it tells me that the people at the top are not very thankful. Because if they're very thankful, they would say yes to um, reparations. And by the way, I just want to let you know, Jesse and I were at the meeting with Jamie Raskin's congressional staffer, where we fought very hard for cash paying reparations with an anti-black hate crime bill. So Raskin staffers were very quiet, silence, because they never expected someone at a meeting to be, to how do I say this? To be, I can't. I'm a little nervous right now. I apologize. So forgive me. I guess, to be cordial, right? Because I knew I had to, like what Audra said, someone has to step up the plate. If someone does not step up the plate, it means justice is delayed, and we don't want that to happen. And sometimes I feel that, when I'm emailing, several legislators at the federal, state, local levels, sometimes I feel that I let American freedmen down, and it gives me motivation to fight harder every day, right? And yes, I do think about, cash payment reparations every day. What would it look like, right? And see the smiles on American freedmen. And I think there's a way to get, a lot of people on board with cash payment reparations, especially those who are non-Black Americans. Think of it like a loan, right? For example, right? And I think I've sent this to several other people. So let's say you give a loan to your friends, right, with interest, right? So you're saying that, hey, if I give you this loan, I expect that you're going to pay me this amount of money in the X amount of years with interest accumulating every year, right? I think that's the way how I think most Americans understand money, right? Because America's a very capitalistic country, right? And someone said earlier, and it's pretty much the same thing I said. America understands money. So when America understands money, they know that Black Americans have a lot of consumer power, right? Because money is king in this country, right? And Black Americans are the real power of the economy. And a lot of companies know that if they don't do right by American freedmen, yes, the U.S. economy can suffer, right? And also, once Black American freedmen get reparations, they're going to stimulate the economy, add money to the GDP, make the economy stronger, make America um, great again. And so the question I want to ask, I'm sorry to go off, a little bored, apologize. And Chris, I like the work you're doing. Audra, keep up the good work. Tiffany, keep up the good work. Everybody, keep up the good work because
You
credit
too.
has to be shared equally. Yeah, the question I want to ask, sorry. So, um, so Chris, you talked about like I heard earlier you talked about like some people say, "Hey, we can't do reparations. We got to do universal policies," and you emphasize we can eat and chew gum, right? And I'm thinking like sometimes, sometimes I struggle with that message, right? To sell to people, right? Because I thought we could do both, right? Like, how would you frame it in terms of like cash payment reparations need to come first, before universal policies? And that's a backlash I've been getting from, like from, from progressives, Democrats, and the average public. Because I know cash payment reparations definitely need to come first, and also what strategies I need to enhance on my advocacy for cash payment reparation when it comes to following up, following through,
Right.
sending
So
sorry,
Michael, that's a great question. We've only got 5 minutes left, so
sorry about it.
let's get some time to answer that question
Yeah, real
about
quick.
would you
Um,
advocate for cash reparations before universal? Do you have anything?
yeah. So usually to that, for brother Michael, thank you for your thoughts, brother. Keep up the great work you're doing too. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for your spirit. Thank you for your intellect. Um, okay. Two ways to answer this. I'm gonna give you the political hardball answer that I think we need to stand on, and I'm gonna give you the answer that I say was saying in public, like, or not only in public, but like when in response to someone. So I usually will, if folks are giving me a hard time saying no, we should do the other things first, etc., and I say no, we should do this first or that first. Well, one, I'll say, listen, well, some of the things that you want to do are actually going to hurt us. And then I start going to some of those examples that we were talking about earlier. So I actually then start to challenge some of the ideas about how universal. So I think it's an assumption that a universal policy is a good thing, and so I start to challenge it. Like if people are giving me resistance there, but
Chris,
also
sorry, some people have come in since you were talking about that. Can you just give one
yeah,
quick
real quick.
example?
So I made the case, and I want to be a little bit provocative. I want to put something on your minds for food for thought as you leave here. Um, some universal policies hurt American freedmen. I gave an example earlier, affirmative action. That's a policy that originally was supposed to be targeted for us legally and through the courts got widened and through the laws got widened to everybody. And now it is a policy that effectively is harming us because it is taking resources that were supposed to be meant to advantage our group and now advantaging other groups. Okay? That's just what is happening, and we've seen data for years showing that the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action are white women now. Okay? Which is not the group that was targeted. Okay, so the wealth is now being circled right back into the things that we were trying to get it from. See that? Okay. And then there are other examples too. That's the first answer. Second answer is we playing hardball. So listen, if you want support for your universal policy, we want support for reparations. Period. Okay. If you don't give us support for reparations, we're not giving you support for universal policy. Okay. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to do political, or do we want to just do politics? And we can do either one, but one way or another, we have to give reparations.
Let me just I try not to pay attention to the chat, but I saw someone mentioning the fact that reparations isn't on our website yet. We're working on that. We're a scrappy team, let's put it that way. We just launched our new website like a month ago. I have promised that reparations will be on the front page of our website, so it's coming soon.
And also we have been talking to Chris and Tiffany, Audra, of course, early on, and just saying, hey, will you help us with the language? Will you help us
Right.
make sure that we have it all dialed in there?
No.
Real
go ahead,
fast. Jimmy Cricket sucks as
Oh,
a Congress
yes, let's talk about
person.
let's talk about him. That's the
And,
guy I'm
and
running against, by the way, Jimmy Panetta. Yeah, let's talk about him.
under his watch, American freedmen right here in Monterey County, where I'm at, have declined. I don't know if I can look up the numbers fast enough, but I think in the 1980s, it was somewhere around 18,000 in the city of Seaside alone. And right now it's sitting at about 9,000, somewhere in there. And that's under Jimmy Panetta's watch. And that's with the closure of a base. So there should have been, as a Superfund site and a whole bunch of other stuff with monies coming in, something to catch those veterans and those military families and personnel who wouldn't have access to jobs outside of the base because people are too racist to hire us. So I'm looking forward to Sean to coming in here and fixing some of that because it is and has been detrimental to my community here. And Jimmy Crickets sucks. Thank you.
Mimi, is there something that you want a last word here?
You muted, sis.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to unmute. Just to piggyback off of what Audra just said, there actually was legislation passed after the base closures, and it by Bill Clinton that basically was supposed to feed money into the communities that were affected by these base closures, which mainly were African American or freedmen communities. And that money basically was just it either disappeared or it was stolen.
It was
That's
plundered.
the best way to put it. Exactly. I know that there were like insurance policies and people were like, oh, there were no claims. Many of our Black families here went into foreclosure. Um, a lot happened, and it wasn't just here. I think there was like a base near Memphis. Um, there was something up north, I think, in regards to Treasure Island. There was a bunch of things that happened, and this legislation that Bill Clinton has signed was supposed to protect against that. It was supposed to protect families that were losing their homes, people that were losing their businesses, etc. But that just didn't happen. So again, as Audra said, I also feel that the money here was plundered, but it didn't. That money that was set aside did not go to where it was supposed to go. It went somewhere else. And no one's ever gave an explanation of that. Even with all the years that what was called a FORA board that was here for this reform site, no one's ever explained what happened.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Mimi. And we are over time. So I want to thank the panelists. This was a great session. I want to thank everybody that attended. I also want to say, when I ran for this seat 2 years ago, we got the highest vote percentage of any Green running for federal office in the whole country. Okay. So like when we're talking about leverage, like support this campaign, like obviously money would help, but follow us on social media, go to our website, sign up for our email. We send out newsletters once or twice a week, pretty sparingly. So let's support this. Let's build up this campaign and let's build some leverage so the Democrats are afraid that people have an alternative, right? Okay. So Ashley, did you want to close us out, or I think?
Yes, I wanted to drop in next week's town hall.
Okay.
So let me just drop that link in there, and I just want to say thank you again to everybody for joining us and for just doing all the things that you're doing that we need to do together. It's about all of us, every single one of us, and I appreciate every ounce of education we can give to each other and showing up. So thank you so much. So I just dropped in the link. Next week we have the policing in schools town hall, and maybe will actually be there with us as well. And that will be another very important, interesting conversation. So join us there.
All right.